The wind wailed like a wounded creature across the barren flats. Clara, she trudged through the ochre sand, her skirt ripped, fingers trembling, her belly gnawing with emptiness. Her mare, it had spooked and fled hours ago. Her boots, gone. Her lips, cracked from dehydration. A shallow pool nearby, it sustained her, just enough to keep moving. A scraggly shrub offered brief shelter from the blazing sun, granting a fleeting moment of shade before fatigue overtook her. Behind her, the faint thud of hoofbeats lingered, stirring memories of a man she vowed never to face again. The man who once called himself her husband. She stumbled, the world, it tilted. Her knees struck the earth, then her arm, then her cheek against cold rock. Pain flared behind her eyes, spreading like wildfire. She tried to breathe, but only dust and blood filled her mouth. For a long, heavy moment, there was only stillness. No birds, no breeze, just the taste of metal and remorse. In that hazy, half-conscious state, her mother's voice echoed. "Keep it close, my darling. Never trust a man who grins too freely." Then, the darkness swallowed her again. When her eyes fluttered open, the sky, it was bleeding into dusk. Her breath came in short, jagged gasps. A shadow shifted among the sparse trees, towering, quiet, almost ghostly. Amos, he was searching for a stray lamb from his modest flock when he heard the sound of something heavy hitting the stones. For one panicked moment, Clara thought her pursuers had found her, but then the figure knelt beside her. Strong hands lifted her as if she were weightless. A low voice murmured near her ear, "Steady now, you're safe." Clara wanted to scream, to bolt, but her body, it betrayed her. The stranger carried her through the fog, his scent of wood smoke and hide blending with the coppery taste in her mouth. Inside a small log cabin, he laid her on a wool blanket and began cleaning the blood from her brow. His touch, it was gentle, almost tender. She blinked against the dim light and saw him clearly for the first time. His size, it made her breath catch. Broad shoulders, a beard flecked with gray, eyes that looked weary, yet warm. "You're bigger than I thought," she blurted, her voice weak. Her pulse quickened. Could this man be another snare set by her husband, or the first true kindness she'd known in years? He gave a small, fleeting smile, just a twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Most folks say that right before they start to trust me." She watched him quietly, torn between gratitude and fear. His hands were scarred like they'd built or broken too much. Outside, the wind carried the distant rumble of thunder, or perhaps hooves. He glanced at the door, his jaw tightening, as if he sensed what hunted her. Clara woke to the screech of crickets outside and sunlight streaming through a cracked window. Her body ached in every place that remembered the fall. The scent of leather and earth filled the small space. She sat up slowly, the world swaying just enough to remind her she was still alive. A man's voice came from behind the door. "You're awake. Good. You spooked that poor mare half to death." The door creaked open. Amos stood there, holding a tin cup of water and a piece of hardtack. He looked even larger in the daylight, his arms flexing as he set the cup down. For a moment she wondered, should she fear him? Then he smiled, just enough to soften the moment. "You won't be sore for a spell, but you'll pull through." She took the water and drank like she'd been parched for days. Her voice rasped. "You found me out there, alone?" He nodded. "Lucky for you, I was passing through. Lucky for me, you didn't bleed out before I got to you." He knew every stone in these flats from years of roaming, spotting trouble from miles off. She studied him now, her mind clearer. There was a stillness to him, not cruel, not kind, just worn. Men who lingered too long in the wilds often look like that, she thought. "Why were you out there?" she asked. Amos paused, then pulled a folded paper from his coat and set it on the table. The ink was fresh, the words scrawled in a vicious hand. Clara froze when she saw her name. "It came to me 2 days back," he said softly. Your husband sent men into the hills, offering coin to whoever brings you back alive." Her stomach churned, her voice breaking. "And you took it?" He met her gaze. "I burned it." Silence settled over the room. "I don't work for men like him anymore. They make you hunt folks who don't deserve it." He rubbed the scar across his knuckles. "I used to think every bounty was justice. Then I learned most are just fear with a price." Clara stared at the table, her hands shaking. Her husband was closer than she'd feared, and now this stranger was caught in her trouble. Amos poured more water into her cup, his voice low. "Rest here tonight, but by tomorrow, they'll be scouring these hills." Her eyes met his, half frightened, half hopeful. "What'll you do when they find us?" He didn't answer, just turned toward the door and said softly, "Reckon we'll see what kind of man I still am." Outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere in the hills, a gunshot rang out. The sun was sinking when Amos pushed open the cabin door. He didn't speak, just gazed across the valley where the light turned everything golden and still. Clara sat on the narrow cot, her ankles swollen, her thoughts racing faster than the wind. She noticed how carefully he moved, always keeping one hand near the rifle by the wall. He wasn't just cautious, he was expecting trouble. That evening the sound came. Not thunder, not wind, but horses. 2. Close. Clara's breath caught. Amos's jaw tightened. He spoke without turning. "Get under the floorboards. There's room to hide." She shook her head. "No. If they find you here because of me," he cut her off. "Go. I ain't arguing." She crawled beneath the boards as he moved through the cabin, checking bullets, positioning a chair by the window. Through a crack in the wood she saw his boots pacing, slow and steady. Then came the knock. A voice outside. "Amos, you've been keeping company. That true?" Amos leaned against the doorframe, his tone even. "I don't keep company. Not with liars." The stranger laughed, a harsh sound that stirred dust from the porch. "Your name still carries weight, old man. My boss says you can hand her over easy, or we take her hard. Your call." Clara bit her lip until it bled, wanting to scream that she wasn't worth dying for. But Amos just said, "Tell your boss he should have sent more men." The next sound was the click of a hammer, then the roar of a gun. The cabin erupted. Bullets tore through wood, glass shattered. Amos moved like a tempest, fast and sure, aiming with the precision of a man who'd seen too many fights, using the cabin's shadows to his advantage. 2 shots, then silence. The kind that stops your heart. Clara crawled out, trembling, hands coated in dust. One bullet had grazed a man's leg, another his arm, enough to send them scrambling into the night. The earth outside reeked of gunpowder and fear. Amos was bleeding from his shoulder but still standing, eyes fixed on the horizon. They'll be back, next time, with more guns. Clara looked at the blood dripping down his arm and whispered, "Why'd you do that? For me?" He gave a tired, gentle smile. "Guess I got tired of seeing good folks hunted." The sun dipped behind the ridge, casting everything in red and shadow. Clara helped him back inside, her touch hesitant but steady. For a moment they sat in silence, listening to the valley grow quiet. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled, mournful and lone. "Now if you're still with me, grab a cup of tea or coffee, take a deep breath, and tell me, what time is it where you are? And where are you listening from? And if this tale's got your pulse racing, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens when Clara finally faces the man who wants her gone. Trust me, you won't believe what she does next." They left the cabin at first light. The air smelled of rain and smoke. Amos rode slowly, his shoulder wrapped in a torn cloth, and Clara followed close on a horse he'd rounded up for her. Neither spoke much. The only sound was the soft thud of hooves on the dry trail. The town lay ahead, small and hushed, nestled in the valley, like it was holding its breath. Clara's heart pounded harder with every mile. Her husband was there, and if last night's men were any sign, he wasn't planning to let her go free. When they reached the main street, heads turned. A woman dusted in dirt, and a man built like a cliff, both looking like they'd walked through a storm. Amos stopped outside the trading post. The sign read, "Harrington and Sons, land and timber. Her husband's name. Inside, the air was heavy with pipe smoke and ambition. Harrington sat behind a desk littered with ledgers and empty bottles. His eyes narrowed when he saw her. "Well, look who crawled back." His smile was sharp as a knife. Clara stepped forward, her voice shaky, but firm. "This was my mother's land, not yours." He laughed. "Your mother left it to you, sure, but you married me, remember? That makes it mine." Amos stepped closer, his voice low but solid. "Funny thing about that, the law don't see it that way anymore." Harrington snapped his fingers and one of his hired men stepped forward, hand on his pistol. Amos didn't flinch. He leaned in, just enough for Harrington to hear. "I've seen men like you fall before. The law's watching now. Fear's already in your eyes." Harrington's grin faded when Amos pulled a folded paper from his vest. The hired man drew a blade, but a deputy's whistle outside stopped him cold. The crowd outside murmured in agreement. It was proof, unpaid debts, stamped by the bank. "You're broke," Amos said softly, "and if the deputy hears you tried to forge those deeds, you'll be locked up before nightfall." Harrington's hand shook. He reached for the gun at his side, but Clara was faster. She slammed her hand on the desk. "You took everything from me, but you don't get to take what's left of my spirit." Her voice broke, but she held her ground. Amos stood beside her, tall and quiet, his eyes like granite. Outside, the deputy pushed through, sizing up the scene. Amos handed him the paper. "Think this belongs in your records." The deputy read it, then looked at Harrington. "Looks like your luck's run dry." Harrington didn't fight. He just glared at Clara, his pride crumbling like dust. "You'll regret this," he hissed. She met his gaze. "I already did." When the deputy led him away, Clara's legs nearly gave out. Amos caught her before she fell. His hand was warm, steady, real. For a long moment they just looked at each other, too weary to speak. Then Amos gave the smallest smile she'd ever seen. "Now what, Clara?" She looked toward the horizon where the sun broke through the clouds. "I think it's time to stop running." But what she didn't know was that danger wasn't done with them yet, because before the next dawn, the past would come knocking again. They rode out of town as the sun climbed, the sky streaked with soft gold and crimson. Clara didn't look back. The sound of the jail door slamming behind her husband was enough. She'd spent years caged by fear, and now every step of that horse felt like a piece of her past breaking free. Amos rode beside her in silence. The wound on his shoulder had stopped bleeding, but the way he sat told her it still hurt. She wanted to thank him, but the words, they caught in her throat. He must have felt her glance, because he said softly, "You don't owe me nothing. You just needed a chance to start again." They stopped at the edge of the valley, where the grass swayed like emerald flames in the breeze. The old land map still hung around Clara's neck, worn and folded from her mother's hands. She held it out toward the horizon and whispered, "Maybe this land doesn't need to be about wealth anymore. Maybe it can be home." Amos smiled, that slow, warm smile that came from somewhere deep. Then, let's make it one. Weeks passed, and their quiet moments turned into soft laughter over small tasks. Amos patched the cabin roof while Clara learned to fish in the nearby stream. Some days they spoke little, but the silence between them, it grew gentler, like it finally belonged. They built a small camp by the stream, where wildflowers sprouted among the stones. At night, the stars stretched endless above. Clara sat by the water, washing dirt from her hands, watching the moonlight turn everything silver. She'd fled from pain, from loss, from a man who made her believe she was nothing. But sitting there, with Amos quietly mending a bridle beside her, she realized something simple. Freedom wasn't just about escaping. It was about choosing where to stand when the world tried to break you. When she looked at him, she saw a man who'd stopped running too. Two souls,
both worn thin, learning that maybe healing doesn't come in a single sunrise. Sometimes it takes miles. Sometimes it takes another weary heart to remind you yours still beats. She reached for Amos's hand, and for the first time in years, she smiled without fear. "Guess we both made it out alive," he chuckled softly. "Alive's a good start." Now, if you're still here, take a moment. Ask yourself, have you ever had to walk away from something that tried to claim you? Have you ever found your way back to peace? If this story stirred something in you, maybe hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next tale we share from the rugged heart of the frontier. And before you go, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it where you are? Because somewhere out there, under the same sky, someone like Clara might be finding her way home.